first glance, America looks stopped, frozen, still. But look again. Across the country, we're working hard with people in our communities to keep America going, offering support, putting resources into new programs, and working with local leaders and businesses. Together, we're all moving America forward. Today, tomorrow, always. Key Bank, ready for tomorrow.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's featured session, Using Family Engagement and Advocacy to Support Optimal Development and Learning in Early Childhood. I'm Kim Diamond-Berry, Director of Research, Policy, and Practice at HighScope. Our discussion today will focus on the following goals. We want to learn about promoting some of the core principles of family engagement and advocacy in early childhood programs in the face of living through a worldwide pandemic. We're also interested in learning more about the impact of trauma, racial equity, and immigration policies on promoting family engagement and advocacy. And finally, we're interested in identifying some strategies for really promoting engagement and advocacy in our respective programs and in our communities. I'd now like to introduce our moderator for today's event. We are extremely fortunate to have Kimberly Gill, news anchor and reporter for WDIV, Local 4, Detroit News, with us this morning. Welcome, Kimberly.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you. I'm just looking forward to this and can't wait to get started here. So we will just move forward. I'm pleased to be with you today and to moderate a discussion that will be packed with great information about family engagement as well as advocacy. Joining me today, we have a team of early childhood experts who will share their experience as well as advice on our topic. Allow me to introduce our panelists to you. First up, we have Gloria Corral. She is a HighScope board member and the president and CEO of the Parent Institute for Quality Education. Next up, we have Samantha Edwards. Samantha is CFLEP training specialist for Access. Give her a wave. Next up, we have Dr. Nkachi Esse. She is the founder and CEO of the Early Learning Neighborhood Collaborative. And finally, we have Portia Kennel. She's a senior advisor for the Buffett Early Childhood Fund. We are so absolutely fortunate to have all of you here with us today. So let's go ahead and get right to it. We'll give them a virtual round of applause, everybody, for being with us today. So our first question. In a HighScope roundtable discussion last August, the panel discussed living through the COVID-19 pandemic and our response to connecting with families and young children. Our focus today will be on how the pandemic, as well as racial injustice, has changed our practice related to promoting parent advocacy and engagement for families with young children in early learning spaces. So Portia, we want to go ahead and start with you. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about your work with the Buffett Early Childhood Fund and what you've learned about family engagement and advocacy in the age of COVID, as well as racial injustice. Go ahead. You can, Portia, your mic is muted if you just want to come off mute.
So sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Hello, everyone out there in the audience. I'm very privileged and honored to be here to speak to you today. And I work for the Buffett Early Childhood Fund, and we invest in early childhood education and learning for children and their families birth to 5. And we invest as a social injustice strategy, and because we believe education is a way to lift families and young children, families with young children and their children out of poverty. So our biggest and one of our biggest investment is the Early Educare Learning Network of 25 schools across the nation, and they are birth to 5 early learning centers, all of which have Head Start and Early Head Start programs all under one roof. So That's what we do. We believe in closing the opportunity gap. So enough about me and the Buffett Early Childhood Fund. I want to tell you 5 things, and I'm going to try to do it very quickly. 5 things that I think we've learned from not only the pandemic, but also from the intentional racial inequities as they emerged out of the pandemic. First of all, I want to say that I just want to bring people in the room, and I just have to say, we have been through something. We have been through something, and let's just take a deep breath and say, I know it's not over yet, but let's just sigh a breath of relief that we've made it this far in a time in history that is unprecedented. Nothing like this has happened, at least in my lifetime. So we got to remember that it's not over yet. We're taking a deep breath. So here are the 5 things, top 5 things we're learning. What I'm going to do is give you an overview. My colleagues on the panel will give you specific examples from their programs, how they're doing all of these things. The first thing I think we've learned from the pandemic is relationships matter. I know you said we know that, but we really know it now because we, all of us in the audience and the work in early learning, were able to build and sustain meaningful virtual relationships to support family and child well-being in the midst of a pandemic. We did not run, we did not hide. Now, we had to learn a few things. We might have stopped a moment, but we stopped and we kept moving forward. We held the emotional well-being of children and families in our hand because we knew they needed us. Now, the second thing, so we can take that with us going forward. The relationships mattered even more than what we thought. The second thing we've learned is parent and teacher relationships went deeper during the pandemic. I've had teachers say that they were even more diligent in reaching out during the virtual time when centers had to be stopped, had to be closed. And as a result of that, I think we have taken into the future a deeper appreciation for each other's role. I know we're always trained in early childhood to say, oh, parents are our children's first teacher, but we really know it now because when the centers and our schools closed down and the only way we could reach children was with their families, then we understood and appreciated their role in their children's learning. And I think parents understood and appreciated better teachers' role. The other thing is we were humbled by this pandemic, but we weren't surprised that the pandemic shined a bright light on systemic inequities in early education and care. While we know that all children are born learning, we know that there are inequities deeply rooted within the American early education system, and these equities are experienced disproportionately by Black and Brown communities, families, and children. And now we can't hide from that. Now we have to really deliberately and intentionally address those issues. The final thing, 2 things I want to talk to you about is parent leadership and voice. I really think we will not achieve the goals that we want to achieve and the vision that we want to achieve with early education unless those families and parents most impacted by the issues in early education are at the table all the time, helping to decide, develop, and lead solutions to these challenges. So with that, I want to go to this slide. I'm bringing this slide to you, even though we won't have time to talk about it, but just know that this is one of the resources that we use in the time of the pandemic. And they're in the chat box, and you can follow up on all the resources, including this one, if you want to after this conference. I'm lifting this particular research study up because it is driven by parents' voices and needs. The rapid assessment of pandemic impact on the development of children and families is a survey that is driven by parents' input. This survey started last year in April and is still running today. For the first 5 months of the pandemic, this survey collected information directly from parents and families as they were experiencing it. And I'm bringing it up because that's what we've got to do. We've got to hear more from the voices of parents, and they have to be at the table with us as we seek to solve these issues and challenges in early childhood education. So the main thing about this rapid assessment pandemic survey is that over 9,000 parents and families across the country are continuing to provide information about how they are experiencing this pandemic. That's valid information. We're not thinking about it. We're not wondering about it. I know those of you who are working in the classroom, you see the teachers and you know something's going on out there with the families. What this data will do, why do we care about it? Why am I bringing this up to you? Why is this data even important? Well, it's important for the following reasons, because parents and children come into our places of learning as they are. And this survey talks about directly from parents with their voices, parent emotional well-being, child emotional well-being, material hardships. That means the ability to pay for basic needs, food, clothing, shelter, utilities, which were threatened during this pandemic and are still threatened in some of our families. The other thing it asks about childcare. You know, a lot of our families do have to work, and is there childcare and other things that they need to help them be able to work and provide for their children. The final thing it does, it asks parents directly. This is the voices of parents driving the data directly from families is pediatric healthcare. And so next slide, let me tell you what the final thing we got out of this is, this is what I call, or we call, the hardship chain of reaction. Next slide. Next slide. I want to also magnify, I'm sorry, the slide before that one, I haven't spoken. Okay, I want to magnify the hardship chain of reaction, because we know, because of the inequities based on race and ethnicity, that Black and brown families suffered most during this pandemic. If you can see from this data slide, that it's families that reported hardships, inability to pay for food, clothing, shelter, etc., basic needs. Black families are almost 75% over the thing, 75% of the people. Then next is Latinx community, and then last is white. But we have to keep our eye on those inequities. Now, the next slide. This is emotional distress in households, and I'm bringing it to us because the parents or children are coming into our classrooms with emotional stress. And this survey asks parents directly, how are they feeling emotionally? How do they perceive their children doing emotionally? And that's critically important when they walk into our classroom. Now, the final slide here, next slide. This is what I call the chain reaction of hardship. What you need to know is that financial and material hardship leads to caregiver, family distress. That leads to child distress. And when they come to our centers, we need to know the context of what they're experiencing around their emotional health, the emotional health of children as well as family, because they're linked. So the more increased financial, material hardship, greater caregiver, family distress, and greater child distress. And so we were in a chain reaction during the pandemic. But the good news is that we were able to develop relationships that help parents and children and families manage that stress. And that would be something that we have to continue to do as we recover in these next months.
Portia, thank you so much for your presentation. And I believe that the research and your graphics really helped to put it into perspective. We appreciate that. We're going to transition to the next speaker now. Gloria Corral, if you would unmute your mic. Gloria?
Yes, hi, I'm here. Thank you so much, Portia. This is a wonderful background in terms of a national perspective. Parent Institute for Quality Education, we're a social justice educational equity organization that works across the country by supporting the practices and the engagement, Portia, that you mentioned, that one-to-one connection, the ability really to understand holistically the needs of families. And we provide direct services in California. We serve about 18,000 families in California directly. And we do that in a way that really honors the relationship piece. The number one thing that Portia mentioned, the importance of building those relationships. Our work with families is evidence-based precisely because we understand that in order to build trusting relationships, those relationships have to be built on culturally and linguistically responsive ways of engaging. There is no one approach because there is no one family. There is no one child. It is by looking holistically at the children and at the families and at the communities. And so that's the work that BICA does. We do our work in 16 different languages precisely because we believe firmly that it's through
Okay, Gloria, I believe that maybe we've lost your audio. We'll give it a few seconds here. Maybe it'll pop back. Not so much. So we'll just keep it moving then and hope that Gloria can get those technical difficulties worked out. We'll move on and transition to the next speaker and come back to Gloria once she figures out the audio issue there. So Dr. Esse, would you please unmute your mic and tell us a little bit about your work?
Yes, thank you so much. I am so excited to be here. Thank you again. I am so excited to be here. This is really a privilege and honor to share what we have been doing. I am really happy that Portia shared the national landscape for us to see. Setting that ground is so important because now we can see naturally what is going on in our country and how children of color, predominantly Black and brown babies, are continue to be left behind, and we're seeing that with the impact of COVID. Our work, really, Early Learning Neighborhood Collaborative, started way back in 2009. That's when our superintendent of Grand Rapids Public School really alerted the community that only 13% of the children coming to kindergarten in select neighborhoods were ready for kindergarten. Come on now, if you're not ready for kindergarten, we know that you're not ready for life. So we knew that we had to really roll up our sleeves and get started with this work. So the purpose of ELNC is really to change the life of most vulnerable children through the power of education. We know that education really unlocks the potential for children, especially vulnerable children. So ELNC is concentrated in the high poverty area of Grand Rapids, Michigan. ELNC is a trusted, place-based early learning collaborative that provide funding, innovative shared services support, advocacy to our partner organizations rooted in the vulnerable communities. Through our successful two-generation approach, ELNC and the partners provide family support and high-quality early childhood education services to the family. Now, the thing that is really the secret sauce for ELNC, the reason why our work is so important in this community and why we believe that is very successful is that we are place-based. What does it really mean to be place-based? Place-based means that we got tired of our children being picked up from their neighborhood, staying in a bus for 35 minutes to 40 minutes, so some children 1 hour every day to go to another community for early childhood education. Think about it. A 3-year-old child, a 4-year-old is being corralled, moved around from one place to another to get just early childhood education. What message does it send to this child? It sends a message that your community is not good enough. We are punishing the child for the community being good enough because of we didn't do our job. So place-based, we are committed to the belief that the best environment for early childhood education for any child is rooted in their community. Now it's up to us to make sure that the community is rich enough to support the development of that child. We also knew that for our work to really benefit these vulnerable children, that we have to be culturally competent. That means the environment that child comes into need to look like the environment that the child is familiar to, because it sends a message right away to the child's brain. It's okay to be here. Most of the time when our children are struggling in preschool program or in even elementary and secondary school program, is because they don't see themselves in environment. When you don't see yourself in environment, your body cringes up. Your brain is telling you, oh, now you need to be on guard. You need to be on guard. No wonder a child will react just because another child is coming closer and they feel threatened. So cultural competence, we believe the child would develop and grow in the best way that is consistent with their cultural rhythm and pattern. And I cannot emphasize that enough. Children need to be in an environment that supports their cultural rhythm and pattern, and especially of their family. ELNC is also outcome driven. Okay, we know for the last, 100 years or so, most organizations will come into our community, mine our data, use the data, our children are poor, they don't do this, they don't do this, and take it to go develop programs and come into our community to implement it. No, we are a little different. We use our data because we get our data directly from our parents, our community who have lived it. So we ensure that our children develop and are educated, not by the good work, but also the evidence. So once we get that data to find out where the need is, then we develop the program that is culturally competent, that is place-based. And once our children start coming to us, we continue to monitor all those areas to make sure that they are getting what they need. We also know that we needed to be creative and innovative. Let's face it. The seven last word of the dying organization is that we've always done it that way. We don't want to keep on doing it that way. And now you've also seen that Portia have shared this national data for us that shows that we can't go back like that. We need to move forward. Well, we recognize that in 2009, which is really going through the depression of the economic collapse and all those kind of things. So you can imagine how COVID have really pushed us even further. So being creative and being innovative, looking for different ways to service our children. The one way we did that with ELNC is that we started creating little preschools. We have little preschools scattered all over the place. In that case, it makes it easier for our children and our family to be able to walk to preschool versus trying to be on the bus for a long time. So with current efforts, what it does is that if we keep doing things the way we have been doing it before, it leaves far too many children behind. And what we know that we needed to do is that we needed to find an innovative approach. And ELNC is one of the innovative approaches in early childhood education that I've seen lately. Our priority, because I know we're trying to get Ms. Corral back. Our priority is really to ensure that teachers are able to educate all children in our neighborhood that are vulnerable, and then mostly make sure that they are ready for kindergarten day one. If you want to learn more about ELNC, you need to go to elncgr.org. Thank you so much.
Dr. Hesse, thank you so much. So much of what you said it just makes perfect sense. Representation matters so much. We appreciate you telling us about what you do and a little bit about your work. We'll move on to the next speaker now. Samantha Edwards, please unmute your microphone and tell us about what you do.
Hi there, and I am trying to turn my camera on, but it's telling me that the host has stopped me. So whenever it is possible, if someone could just pop me back in, but I'll go ahead and start talking about what we do here at Access. So, oh, perfect, there it is. I knew as soon as I stopped worrying about it, it would work itself out. So Access actually stands for the Arab American Community Center for Economic and Social Services, which is quite a lot to say to folks, especially for folks who are new to English. So Access is a great way because that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to help folks get access to the resources and services that they need. And the mission of Access is really to empower our communities to improve on their economic, their social, and their cultural well-being. So even though they're trying to become citizens of this country in lots of cases, because we do work with a lot of immigrant families, we do want them to maintain their cultural well-being, which really touches on what was just being talked about previously. And we have a lot of different programs. I could talk all day about the different departments and programs that we have, many of which assist immigrants and their families. And a lot of those exist in our youth and education department. And that is largely what I'll talk about today because I'm with the adult and family learning portion of that. And while we are the Arab American Community Center, and Arab Americans are a large population of the folks that we serve, we do provide services for anyone who seeks them, including really largely the Hispanic and Latinx populations that are in the Metro Detroit area, as we do work in Detroit as well as Dearborn, Michigan. And like I said, I'll be talking more about some of those programs in the youth and education department today, but Access has lots of other programs that they do. And what I'm going to be talking about has been in place for some time, or at least has been implemented to some degree. So there's a lot of rapport and there's a really strong relationship between our staff and the people we're serving. Portia said earlier that number one, relationships matter. And that is definitely the case for us. Even when COVID hit, we really retained a lot of our families because we already had that rapport with them and we were helping and supporting them, and they were already asking us for resources and information, assistance, services, all of those things. So we really just started putting out more referrals, making more things happen, and we learned some things along the way. But we have one of our school readiness coordinators, Nahed. She's actually still in contact with some folks who sought services back in 2012. So we are really still working with families, even who have gotten a good grasp on, you know, being here and they've got their lives all in order, but they like to be a part of, we're a part of the family too now. So we keep in contact with them, and then we're there if they ever need other assistance, because sometimes things come up. What we did find during COVID, though, was that there was quite a disparity, even among the communities that we served between Dearborn and Detroit, that there was not equal access to technology or internet access. You know, children were given laptops or tablets to take home to go to school, but some of them didn't have internet at home. Some of them didn't have electricity at home. So school became impossible to attend. And on top of that, a lot of folks either only had one device, or their internet, if they did have it, couldn't support more than one Zoom session. So they had to choose, okay, who's going to class? Which of the children? If I have class, do I go to class or do I let my children attend school? There were also language barriers, not just for immigrant families who were learning English, who were trying to help their children with schoolwork, but also computer literacy. Even folks who have spoken English and that's their native language, they had to learn some computer terms, and we had to do some teaching of our own staff on, okay, how do we use Zoom? What do we do now? So not only were we helping our clients, we were also helping ourselves learn some computer literacy as well. And we spent a lot of time on the phone, talking with folks, translating information for them, explaining information. We ended up creating a lot of documents and translating a lot of documents to help families get information and help both about COVID and about teaching their children basic skills and helping them hone their academics at home. In our 21st century after school programs, we created activity kits. So there were all kinds of materials for the children to use at home, all types of games and puzzles and things like that. And we also created guides that we sent home in the family's native languages to let them know, what can you do with all these materials? What can the children learn? What games can you play with them? All those kinds of things. And needless to say, having bilingual staff was incredibly beneficial during this, because that means that we didn't have to wait for some other service or organization to translate documents for us. We were on the spot creating a document and then immediately creating it in all the needed languages, namely Arabic and Spanish for our populations. And more than anything, it was really important for us that folks were getting their basic needs met. This was always a priority for us, especially for immigrant families who are coming into the country and just learning about all of the ways to get their resources and all of the other things they needed. But it became even more so during the pandemic. So lots and lots of referrals went out for food assistance, rental assistance, utility payment assistance, all those kinds of things. And a lot of times, because we had that trusting, established relationship with the families, they were willing to share with us the troubles that they had and the things they needed so we could get them connected. But a lot of times they weren't as comfortable with the folks that we referred them to, or maybe their family doctors or the schools, the principals, all of those folks. So a lot of times we were kind of a middleman. We would translate if a place they wanted to go to didn't have translation services available, all of those things. And the last point I want to touch on is just very briefly on immigration policy. There were a lot of families that were really nervous about signing up for these assistance programs and getting their basic needs met because they were concerned about the public charge being an issue. They feared that by getting help with their basic needs, that it would affect their immigration status and they wouldn't be able to become a citizen in the country. Now public charge has been eliminated. That's no longer a thing. And we conveyed that to the families and they felt much more comfortable about their status in the US. And then they were able to get those services to help themselves and their families so they could eat and have electricity and all of those things. And we really felt that it was our responsibility through all of that to make sure that on top of everything else, they had accurate information about COVID in their native language, because there's a lot of misinformation that happens in translation, or like there are just big scientific words that even we can't really explain, all those things. So we developed our own materials. We translated existing materials from the CDC, and we held live Zoom events in Arabic about testing and vaccinations to combat all that misinformation. And I believe we also did some social distancing in-person live events as well when it was possible to do that outside. So we've been working to keep those relationships happening and keep our branches in the community, even though we're not seeing as many of our clients face to face.
Ms. Edwards, thank you so much. You really talked about a lot that I hadn't even considered. And I look forward to learning more about Access as well, because I was not aware of your organization. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
So we'll move on to question number 2, and I'll just read it here. What can we do as EC educators and parent and family advocates to ensure that families are aware of and understand the essential elements of early childhood education and the importance of the foundation parents create in supporting children's optimal development and learning? Can you give examples of some of the partnerships formed with families in your organizations and how these connections have supported the movement of parents from awareness to advocacy and action related to young children's development and learning? For question number 2, we will start with Gloria Corral, who has come back with us. So nice to see you back. If you would please unmute your mic and give us your response.
Sure. And I think, there's really 3 critical and important themes, I think, that emerge as we think about how do we think about families in this context. One is to acknowledge what you've been hearing consistently, the holistic nature of how families experience and live through not just the pandemic. I wish I could say that these inequities existed or happened as a result of this health crisis, but we know they are structural. We know they will remain. And so we need to be very clear-eyed about what does it mean then to have a sustained approach to really thinking about what it means to engage and support the voices of families and perspectives and communities. And so 3 things to think about. One is you do that by really developing partnerships, meaning that you actually, as an early childhood educator and an early childhood asset or resource in the community, you are often the one trusted messenger in that context. And so really reaching out and looking to see what additional resources exist in the community so that you are able, I think as Samantha pointed out, to really understand that there are these other supports in the community that will enable parents to feel that extension and their ability to be responsive. So that's one. The second, I think that is really important is to also understand that in order to develop two-way communication, it's about supporting and giving information to parents, of course. It's about intentionally developing parent skills. And I mean that to say that it is an actual intentional effort to really build that context for families about building community, about seeing each other as learners, as seeing the other parents in their context as critical partners. So that's the second, is to really think about two-way communication, both on the parent side and importantly, on the educator side. The minute that parents start feeling that they have a voice and they want to exercise it, I think it's really important for the structures, the educators, our early childhood system, to really be willing to listen. And I think that's a really important element that cannot be underemphasized. I think we don't do enough as a system to really support the educators' training and support around how you solicit input, how you listen to parent voices, so that when they come, they actually feel welcome, and that this is a relationship building in a two-way format. So that's the second. And then the third, which I think is critically important, is that there are going to be times when there are differences of opinion, when there are competing priorities. And I think it's really acknowledging that oftentimes you don't have the resources, you don't have the translators, you don't have perhaps some of the needed supports. It's acknowledging that this tension that exists actually means there's an action to take, right? So whether that is coming together as a community and saying, really what we need is additional technology resources. Who then can we partner with, and who needs to hear that? Is it an elected official, right? And what would that mean, and who can help us in that ask? Is it going to a funder, right? To have parents tell their story, to use that voice to make evident some of those needs. And then I think for me, the really important piece of this in terms of moving forward is, and then what does it mean in order to take action, that there is a spirit and a sense and a process of reflection. That's what we do with our families, is we provide some knowledge and information. We intentionally work with them to develop skills with each other, so that they see each other as partners with other parents, and we build community. And I think that's a critically important element that if anything, we have learned that building community and having community is really the way that we ensure that holistically we can respond. And so I would say those are the three really important elements of ensuring that parents' voice is heard, that parents feel empowered to use that voice, and then both the educators are ready to listen in whatever language, but importantly that this isn't on the early childhood system exclusively. It's a communal, community approach. So the relationships, developing those partnerships with community-based organizations, developing those relationships with elected officials, developing those relationships with funders. It's all of that. We can't be looking at it as one-way communication or one kind of silver bullet. There aren't silver bullets. It's doing all of this and collectively understanding that it might take a little bit of time, but we have to be that conscious and that intentional about developing that sense of efficacy and agency through the development of skills and the ability to build that community among and between parents, because these needs are holistic as you've been hearing. And it's going to be different. I think Portia's slides really indicated that. We also just shared the survey that we did with the families we serve. And you know, when we ask, what's your number one priority for parents? It was education. Their number one priority was the education and well-being of their children, their economic well-being. They were all exactly their number one priority, because this is illustrative of the fact that you have to have these basic needs, and they cannot compete with the well-being of their children. Their number one concern is the well-being of their children, as well as feeding them, making sure they have housing, right? All these other things. And in order to do that, we have to as educators, we have to as community members, we have to acknowledge that that's our role, is to ensure we see the whole child, that we see the whole family, and that we understand the whole community.
And all of that takes a community, as you said. Thank you so much, Ms. Corral. We will move now to Dr. Essay, and I'll ask you the same question. Give us some examples of some of your partnerships formed with families in your organization. If you would please just unmute your microphone.
Yes. Thank you so much. And I'm really loving how the panelists are sequenced, because it really builds onto each other. Gloria was talking about listening to families, giving them their voices, and helping them navigate those competing priorities. So ELNC, when we got started, you know, early childhood education is what I know, and that's what I do. I was one of those early childhood professionals. I just wanted to create the slot, you know, the building, so that the children can come and be educated, right? And then we started noticing that something is missing. Our parents are worn out. They come in, they have all these, as Gloria said, competing priorities. So ELNC now emphasizes a two-generation approach, a true two-generation approach to early childhood education, meaning that we believe that empowered families build better learners. Empowered families build better learning. So by developing parents to be community leaders while working with their children, we create a stable learning environment both inside and outside the classroom. So in 2012, that's when we recognize this. We started getting data confirming what we know intuitively, that parents who are struggling to meet basic needs and have little or no social capital may have limited capacity and resources to act as a positive change agent for their children. If you're already struggling to make ends meet, how are you going to do more? And I know back in the day, we'll tell our parents, go read to your child, do this, do this. When a parent is struggling with basic needs, it's not that they don't care. It's not that they don't want to read to their child, but they have other things, you know, that is competing for their attention. So in response to that, we partner with Pona Consulting to really develop a strategy that can help us empower our parents, impact our children. And you could see the slide on your screen right now. So the core strategy of this model is to provide support through the services of a family coach. So in our typical classroom, every child have access to a wonderful, qualified, culturally competent teacher, right? And our parents, because we're we use two-generation approach, our parents equally have access to a family coach. A family coach, not a family manager, not a caseworker, but a family coach to work alongside with them. This family coach helps them identify and address barriers that is preventing them from meeting their basic needs and from meeting their basic needs. So once we help them identify that, then we work with them, and the basic needs include areas such as health, education, you know, food, shelter, all those things that sometimes we take for granted. Once the basic needs is met, then we move on to helping them create social capital inventory, you know, look at that, right? So with our basic needs, if the family is scoring 3 or less, we would develop a family-centered plan to kind of help them navigate it. In most communities, there are a lot of resources. I know in Grand Rapids, Michigan, there's a lot of resources, but the problem is that our vulnerable families have a lot going on that they just don't even know how to navigate those resources. Let me give you an example, especially with what happened with COVID. During the height of COVID, well, nobody really wanted to see anybody or touch anybody and all that with the whole social distances. We noticed that our food pantries were saying, yes, you could call ahead of time and let us know you're coming. We will pack your food. You will drive by, to make sure that we're not, coming closer to one another. One of the workers will bring your food and you open up the trunk of your car and we'll put the food in there. Well, that works if I have a car and my car is running and everything is okay. So when we notice that most of our families are not even getting access to food, well, our family coaches rose up and started doing what they do better. They will go and pick up that food and drop it in front of the house for the families, right? So that's what we're doing. I noticed that we are running a little bit of time. So with the family, helping our families meet their basic needs. Once they meet their basic needs or they are secured, then we start helping them to build the social capital, right? That's what we do. So based on the success of our model, empowering parents, impacting children, we have made the decision to make sure that all our early childhood education programs have that. All our classrooms, all our parents have access to a family coach. And that's how ELNC empowers the parents and impacts the children. Ultimately, it's about the child. But if you don't have empowered parents who can do their best to help raise that child, we can do all we want to do in the classroom, but we're not going to raise that child for the parent. We have to make sure that the parent is strong enough to be able to do the work. So I'm going to leave it right here to give other panelists opportunity to talk. Thank you so much.
And thank you so much, Dr. Esse. We really appreciate it. We are running a little short on time, so we'll give Ms. Edwards, Samantha Edwards, an opportunity to tell us a little bit about your partnerships that have helped parents become better able to facilitate advocacy as well as leadership for their children. Go ahead and unmute your mic if you haven't already.
Definitely. So here in the United States, there are a lot of expectations for children as well as their families before and when they get to school. So things like parent-teacher conferences, signing the children up for certain things, signing permission slips, all those things. And in a lot of the immigrant populations that we serve in our Access to School program, which is our school readiness program I mentioned before, many of the mothers that come in, they're not aware of this expectation. And when they become aware of it, they don't feel necessarily that they have the skills or the ability to teach their children what they need to know, either because of confidence or because they feel like they struggle with concepts in English themselves and they're learning right alongside. So our school readiness program really began with empowering the women who are caring for young children to be the child's first teacher. And the reason that we focused on women was because largely in the communities that we were serving, that was culturally what was happening. So what happened was we created English as second language classes, and we also created some parenting classes for the families to take. And we started from scratch because we found that the language that was used in the curriculums or the preps for children to enter kindergarten, it was very difficult for the families to understand what was being asked because of the way that things were worded. So we went ahead and created our own curriculum based on the parent-child interaction, but also to help the immigrant families understand what local curriculums were asking for, how to teach their children before they go to school, and any of those obligations on their part, like the parent-teacher conferences I mentioned. And culturally, like I said, a lot of times mothers were uncertain because the fathers in the family were the decision makers. And so our folks said, okay, we can talk to your husband or dad first. And after speaking with the fathers and explaining our program and what we were trying to do, a lot of them actually encouraged the mothers to join the program and become a part of it. And after a while, parents actually started recruiting other parents for our programs. And as it comes to pass, we haven't really advertised for most of our services in several years now. And we still have a waiting list for both our English and our parenting classes because parents are telling other parents as more families immigrate into the country. And all of this kind of set our foundation to bloom our programming even bigger than that, to really help improve that relationship between the parents and the children, because our relationship with them is important, but the parents and the children's relationship is important because that's the most longstanding. And families know that that's important, especially after, they've taken some classes and they figure this out, but it's really a matter of follow through in that prioritization, because as Dr. Harris was just talking about, they have a lot of different responsibilities and they have to figure out how to prioritize it. So we work with the families to really help them critically think about what their challenges are and what they want to change. And we help them make and manage their own goals. And we just kind of follow up and help along the way as needed, but it's largely self-sufficient and we're just here as support. And it was a really big case management project, but it was very well worth it.
Thank you.
And it's ongoing.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Ms. Edwards. Ms. Kennel, very briefly, and the only reason I say brief, we have so many great questions in our Q&A box that I want to give people time to ask the question or answer the questions. You guys enough time to answer the questions, so we're running a little bit behind. Briefly, tell us your Parent Ambassador program. Tell us about that.
Hi, everybody. I realize we're running late, but I just want to put on the table that parent ambassadors, going back to the 5 lessons learned, invest in the leadership and advocacy of parents, because we're not going to solve this problem without them in a leadership role. So the best thing I think we've done to make sure our early childhood investment is sustained over time is to invest in a year-long leadership and advocacy program for parents in our program. And it's called Parent Ambassadors. The Parent Ambassadors is usually a 20-parent cohort. They stay together for a year. They receive training on communication, leadership, legislative advocacy, grassroots organizing, and they are responsible for reaching out to the legislative representatives, to other parents. They become early childhood advocates for themselves, their schools once they leave our early learning center, and their communities. If we want to sustain any of the gains that we made with their children, if we want to change the world for early childhood education, we must invest in leadership and development of the parents. Parent Ambassador, there is in the box chat box should be references to where you can talk to the people that are leading our parent ambassador efforts. And we now have parent ambassadors, about 11 of them all over Washington state. We have 5 groups in 5 states, and we just started the beginning of a parent ambassador program in Nebraska, where I'm located. So if you want to win this battle, you've got to invest in parents. And we think our parent ambassador model is one that's adaptable to other places.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much, Ms. Kennel. Our next question, if you could look into the future and reimagine family advocacy and engagement for EC educators and parent-family advocates, what 2 strategies would you give them as they go back to their respective EC programs and communities? I'll start with Ms. Edwards for that question. Please unmute your mic.
Hello again. So as has kind of been a general conversation piece today, is that rapport and that relationship piece. That's a really crucial foundational step for what we're trying to do with the families here, because once you have a relationship with a few families or a few parents, then your resources, your messages, what you're trying to do is really going to spread throughout the community, especially in our case, because it's very tight-knit within our communities. There's a lot of families that all live on the same street or in the same neighborhood, so they're all able to get those resources because they live in the area. And the ways that we create rapport are some of the ways that I have previously discussed, but we also make sure that the families don't always have to figure things out for themselves. So if we refer them to a service, we don't just kind of hand them off. Okay, there you go to the other service. We help them continuously along the way. If they need help making the phone calls, because a lot of times when you make a phone call, people answer in English. So if they're still feeling not so confident about that, that's one of the things we focus on too, is feeling confident about what you're trying to say, and that you'll know that you'll be able to communicate with people. That always makes a person feel better. And so we support the client in anything that they need. We're available. We're genuinely interested in their success, not just when they learn a word in English or they teach their child something, but also when they have personal goals achieved, like getting a job or getting a new car or things like that. And all of that requires a lot of time and initiative on our staff. There are staff who are so dedicated. They get text messages and phone calls every moment, every evening. It doesn't matter what time of day it is, because again, it's family. We're all family. And it's really helpful also to have a liaison of some kind, someone that's kind of the go-to person or a couple people that they have a relationship with, that they feel really comfortable with. And it also is really helpful. Our big goal is to eliminate all the barriers. So not just a couple of those barriers, but everything that is holding families back, all of those responsibilities and concerns that are piling up. How do we help them refocus those so that they can focus more on their relationship with their child and with their families? And when they get to accomplish that and all of their other personal goals, they're really happy and they're really proud of themselves. And then they go tell other people about what's happening for them. And the community just continues to grow and thrive. So all of those kind of help you maintain that relationship and build up the community at the same time.
Lots of great information. Thank you, Ms. Edwards. We'll transition to Ms. Kennel. You share some of your research and strategies focusing on creating paths to leadership through family engagement and advocacy. Please unmute your mic.
You know, when I thought about this, I only want to share two things that I would like the audience to take away. The first thing we need to do for ourselves, we're in a good place now, but we need to make sure as a result of this pandemic that the mind shift, the shift in our minds and a shift in resources starting here and now and into the future, to make sure that the educational system and educators shift from family engagement as an add-on to what we do, to family engagement as an essential, fundamental component of effective teaching and learning practices for young children and their families. We got to keep that mindset. We saw how much we needed the families when the pandemic was here, but now we're going to take that forward. We've got to take that mindset. It's not something extra to do. It is a core function of your teaching and learning, family engagement. The second thing I would want people to take away, and there's research that backs all of this up. The second thing I would like you to do to take home is I want you to implement the strategies defined in Don't Look Away, embracing an anti-bias classroom, and particularly as it relates to family engagement, I would love you to implement the 4 E's: exploration, expectations, education, and equipment. If you put those into practice in your education program, you will see that you're going to create informed
We can't hear.
Okay, we've lost. Do we have her back? We've unfortunately we've lost Ms. Kennel's audio. Are you?
I'm sorry. Was I on mute all that time?
No, well, just maybe the last 30 seconds or so, not the entire
Okay,
time.
right. Just don't look away. Put that in the chat box. Specifically, chapter 7. Implement that. That's what you take back to you with you in your center, and a strategy for building strong parents and engaged parents that have children that succeed throughout their education trajectory. We've got to shift our mindset. Family engagement is not something extra. It's a critical teaching and learning practice. If you want any of your teaching interventions to be sustained over time, we've got to invest in families.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ms. Kennel. Ms. Corral, talk about some of your strategies as well.
There's a little bit of me that just wants to say mic drop, because here it is, right? This is what Dr. Kennel was saying. But I think the one thing that I would add, it is always there as a reminder that that one of the things that we really need to acknowledge and embrace as we think about and really listening and supporting skills development so that parents can tell their own story and advocate, because no one will be a better and stronger advocate than the parents on behalf of their children, their families, and their communities. And I think that as Portia was saying, that's a fundamental shift of mindset, of our mindset, of those of us that are on the other side. And I think that this is the opportunity to think about that. The final thing that I'll say that we've learned, especially as we think about this transition as this crisis evolves, is that we don't forget that there was communal trauma, that as we think about loss and grief, that a lot of the families that we serve saw multiple members of their family infected by COVID, suffering loss, long-term consequences, but a lot of deaths. And I think that it's really important that as we think about what it means to transition to this next phase of COVID and crisis, that we don't miss that opportunity to acknowledge and bring in.
Okay. It looks like we've lost Ms. Corral again. We'll just move to Dr. Esse, if you would just unmute your mic and tell us about some of your strategies. And I'm going to limit you to 2 minutes because we really want to get to the question and answer portion, and we're still running a little bit behind. So go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much, and I understand that. So 2 things. One thing I want the participant to get out of this is that, am I on? Yeah.
Your video isn't on.
Okay, but I can keep talking. Okay, so one thing I want the participants to get is this. Gone are those days where we really get parents and we expect that we can educate them. We can't keep on doing that. For ELNC, we have learned our lesson. So 3 things I want you to do if you're really thinking about authentic family engagement is, number 1, find authentic way to engage them. Not engage them to educate them, just to engage them. That's why ELNC EPIC model works, because they have a family coach that engage them, talking to them, trying to find out, working with them to find out what are the barriers that, the basic needs to meet that. Once you engage them, you support them. You see, when I feel supported, when a family feels supported, they can do all that things because they know that somebody else is there also to support them walk through that. So you engage them, you support them, and then you educate them. Because we do racial equity work, all our parent education is very targeted. What do I mean by that? After we do basic needs assessment, if we notice that 10 families are struggling with housing, why do you call a family meeting to talk about housing for everybody when 10 of them is struggling with that? We do a targeted family parent education, work with that family, get them strong, and then we continue to do those kind of targeted parent education because parents feel honored, they feel respected. I told you what I need and you are helping me get through that, versus the blanket of parent education that we used to do in the 80s. The 80s are gone. We need to meet up with our parents. In terms of advocacy, families have tremendous knowledge about the issues facing their community and the policy changes needed for their young children to thrive, but their voices are often not included in policy and advocacy and agenda. So because of that, ELNC, we recognize that parents are experts of their own lives. They are experts in their community and issues that affect them. So we leverage that, we educate them, we make sure that they're the ones speaking when we have legislative forums and all those kind of things. And don't abuse your families. All our families attending this kind of workshop and training, we pay them. We give them stipends so that they're able to have a, opportunity to come out and fully participate and not worry about what about childcare, what about this and all those kind of things. And sometimes it's not always easy to bring the child with you. If you could have a childcare person come in the home so you could get out and be away from the child for a minute. Those are the things that makes parents feel good about themselves. So thank you so much.
So true. So true. Thank you, Dr. Esse. And thank you to the entire panel. Right now, we're going to switch gears and hear from a former HighScope teacher as well as a parent. Diane Perryman is currently Assistant Director at the Guidance Center in Southgate, Michigan, and used the HighScope curriculum as a teacher in Detroit in the early 80s. Speaking of the 80s, Kay Rush is Child Manager at the Bussey Center for Early Childhood in Southfield, Michigan, and taught and directed the HighScope demonstration preschool. Diane was the preschool teacher for Kay's son. So Kay, why don't you begin by sharing with us how you and Diane formed a partnership in support of your son?
Well, it was very easy to do that because at the time we both were very young teachers starting out back in the 80s, like in 81. We started off as teachers. Diane actually was a parent and then became a teacher, and I did it flip-flop. I became a teacher and then a parent. So our relationship started as colleagues in the Head Start program in Detroit. And when we started having, my child who was in Diane's class, we were involved in Head Start, which had a very, very, very strong parent component. So we really did not, we were just so excited about being a part of Head Start as staff and as parents. So ours was very unique, and Diane, being a little more mature than me, she already had children, and so this was my first child. So she kind of guided me into what to do and what to say and how to support him based on what she saw in the classroom. And I did that, and by us being parents and by us being involved in our children, because actually, while she had my son, I had her daughter in my classroom. So the other parents saw how we were involved, not just because we were teachers, but also because we were parents, and that we got involved in the engagement part. We were on both sides of the parent and the staff. So we plan things for parents so that they can really get involved. And I love listening to what Dr. Nkechi was just saying, that, empower them and support them and then educate. And I was excited because I had stopped I was in school. And then when I had my son, I stopped going to school, college. And it was the Head Start program that really encouraged us to go back to school because they were sending parents back to school as well. And I know what she was saying, that back in the 80s was educate, educate, educate. But I'm kind of glad for that. But we did empower it, and we also did the support, because we tried to break down all those barriers for her, and we're still doing that today.
Yeah. And I just want to point out, somebody in the chat says it's your birthday, so happy birthday.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes,
Absolutely.
I celebrate all month long.
We'll move to Diane. Diane, I want you to join the conversation. Can you share some of the ways in which you reached out to Kay and engaged her around supporting her son's development and learning, and how you worked with Kay to encourage the other parents to become more involved with the Head Start program? Go ahead.
Yes. Kay didn't mention the part that her son always wanted. He said when he was in Head Start, he wanted to be an astronaut. So what did I do? So with the HighScope curriculum, there's a daily routine. It's plan, do, and review. Karen's son, Merlin, always wanted to play in the block area. So plan, do, and review. Plan is when you ask the child, what are you going to do today in the classroom? And the child tells you what he's going to do. And then do is the child goes into the area and say whatever he's going to do, he's going to do. And recall is when the child comes back and, tell you what he did. So anyway, Merlin, Karen's son, he always made this plan to be in a block area. He always wanted to be in the block area. So As a teacher, I went into the area where Marlon was playing and would ask him questions, and we would talk, we would dialogue. Marlon, so you said you're going to build a rocket today. And Marlon would tell me, yes, he's going to build a rocket and he's going to do this and he's going to make it go into space and he's going to do all that. So Marlon would sit in the block area and just build with the blocks for Karen, I like 45 minutes. I'm telling you, it was really, look, Marlon did what he said he was going to do. He planned, he's going to go in that block area, he's going to make rockets. And then afterwards he recalled and said, this is what I did. So how did I encourage Kay? Well, again, Kay was a teacher who crossed the hall from me. She had my child, but I would talk to Kay about Marlon's plan. Back then in the 80s, you know, we didn't have Google, we didn't have internet. So what did I do? I asked Karen to get books and talk to Marlon about what he wanted to do and how he was going to do it. And that's how I engaged with Karen. Karen, we was just not teachers, co-teachers, we formed a partnership. As a teacher to a parent, we had a partnership. We engaged with each other. And today, Marlon is where, Karen? Where Marlon's?
Working for NASA. Working for NASA as an aerospace engineer. And by her telling me to support that and to do that, I did all the way throughout school. He started in preschool. I remember in elementary classes, every science fair, he wanted to, I spent millions, well, not millions, I spent a lot of money at Hobby Lobby getting those rocket launchers and the motors for rockets, because that's what he was into. And it just went with our curriculum. And Diane, I was so excited about it because her and her co-teacher at the time, Miss O.T. Whitaker now, they were the first ones in our program to get the HighScope training. And they would drive from Detroit to Ypsilanti to get HighScope training. So Marlon was getting HighScope from the training room. Someone had mentioned Mary Holman during the conference. And yes, she was the trainer, and they were getting that information raw. And I grabbed hold to that, and that was where I was excited about teaching and teaching in this way of building on the children's interests. And his interest was always space. And I mean, we would watch all the space movies together as a family, and that was his interest. And so building on that was just something that just came naturally. And I want to talk about Diane's daughter, who was in my class. Now because we were close, we had that relationship that the panelists just talked about. And we kind of miss that today with the teachers and the parents relationship, because people want to be separated. But I think through this pandemic, that relationship has kind of come, because we're Zooming now and everybody's relationship, but we had that relationship. And because of the relationship, Diane's daughter saw that we were teachers, you know, and now her and her sister, they are now daycare owners, and they have business mind sense of being what it is for education is important. And I'm just excited about how our children started and where they are now. They're living their dreams. They're doing what they have planned to do, and they're doing it. And we're sitting here reviewing it.
Let me just tell you, Diane, that your story really, it almost brings tears to my eyes, just to know that it's just a testimony of how important it is to observe our children, to step back and just take a look at what their interests are. I have a 2-year-old, and sometimes you just get so caught up. I got to do the laundry. I got to do this.
Right.
And teachers all have so much on them that if you just step back a second, see what they're interested in, and then feed that interest. And my goodness, he's doing what he said he wanted to do in Head Start. That is just amazing. Well, we have a lot of information and questions that we want to get to. So let's hear from some of our listeners. And thank you so much, Diane and Kate. Really, really appreciate that. We would like to hear from our listeners as we move into the participant question and answer portion of the discussion. And, you know, guys, it would help me too if you write your questions, who you would like me to address them to. That would just help me a little bit. So type your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll get to as many as we can. And I will go ahead and get started. Forgive me because I don't have it pulled up here, but there are so many good ones that I was looking at earlier. So let me get back up here to the top. This anonymous attendee says, I was referred to this webinar by my local Indigenous Child Care Center, and I was wondering why the Indigenous communities were not involved in the rapid assessment of pandemic impact on early childhood household survey results, considering they face similar systemic issues as the Black and Hispanic communities. Who would like to?
I think that was meant for me,
Okay.
Kim. First of all, let me say that I appreciate the question, and I sent that to the researcher. I don't know, I can't say that there aren't any Indigenous people in the survey, families in the survey. What I did in those slides was I used the top 3 most populous, the numbers of people in the slide, and the top participants are white families, and the second is Latinx families, and the third is Black families. There may be small numbers of Indigenous people in the population, but people he's doing the survey with. But let me tell you this, I can't answer that. Only the researcher can answer that question, and his name is Phil Fisher. And I put the link to his website in the box already, or someone did. You can list a question with him, because this survey is all going. Right now, it's every other week. And family is driven by families. Families join the survey. They find it on Facebook. They go, I'm in that, I'm doing that. And 1,000 families every other week is on are sending us information about what's going on with them. So I also asked him if he'd be interested in maybe talking to someone of you online, whoever you are, about how he might add more families from Indigenous populations and nations in the survey. So that's what I can tell you. I sent it to the researcher. If I get an answer before this program is over, I'll let you know, or I'll send it to the HighScope staff.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Ms. Kendall. Our next question goes to Ms. Edwards. Is there an access resource in the Ohio area?
So I actually see that a lot of folks were asking about access in different areas, a couple folks in Ohio. Unfortunately, I do not personally know of any resources in Ohio. That's a little bit far out of our area. Right now, as I mentioned, we're serving Dearborn, Detroit. We have a few programs in Melvindale. I know Celeste asked a question about that earlier as well. So we're slowly inching out into the outer communities. And as we continue to receive grants from the government, as they allow us to move into further zip codes, we would love to continue outreaching services. I see someone else asked about Lansing as well. I know there are a few Arab American services in Lansing through the Michigan State University in a lot of cases, but there is not an access there currently. But I'm sure that our organization will be glad to know that there are communities asking for those resources, because that means that we will eventually reach you. So there's actually one more question about Oakland County.
I wanted you to answer that, right?
Yep. And we, again, don't have access services in Oakland County. However, we do have a partner organization called Oakland Family Services. And they do many of the same social services that we do, but for Oakland County citizens. And what was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, and even if they don't have specifically translation services, if that's what you're looking for, they might be able to refer you to someone in the county that does do those things, because they'll have a better knowledge of the resources available in that sector of Michigan.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Our next question is another good one. I am witnessing the emotional issues in families, particularly children. Our teachers can't handle it alone, with many already having their own stresses during this pandemic. Our mental health team has been very, very busy. Has it become essential for us to enhance our mental health supports during these times? as managing emotions is vital in order to learn. So very important. What a great question. Who wants to answer it? Ms. Kendall? You were just
I can answer.
You were so excited about it. Go for it.
Great question.
Yes. Yes. Teachers need support, and we've got to make more partnerships with child mental health and adult mental health partners in the community. And we've got to invite them in to talk with our staff and build their capacity to be able to be the front line, because they're the first ones that are going to see it. Doesn't mean you can be therapeutic and see it, and you can make connections with expertise that do this as a living, but we have to. That's just got to become a central practice in teaching and learning. And it should have been a central practice before the pandemic, but it's definitely going to have to be an essential practice going forward. We've taken that with us. So I'm sorry, I'll let the other people.
No, that's okay. Anybody else want to chime in?
I just wanted to chime in on that, because in the position that I am in now, as the early childhood specialist at the Bussey Center in Southfield, that's one of our main things. In fact, that was one of our goals before the pandemic, the social emotional piece. And we saw the need for it. And we do have our mental health consultant who's been like going overtime, not just for the families, but also for the staff. And we have been making that available to them. We've also have done things for the staff to help them become just mental health things like Zumba classes, meditation. The director and myself, we just went through a 8-week course of mindfulness, or how we can help our staff become better equipped with their emotions and what's going on with them, so that they can be better to serve the families and the children. But mental health is what she's saying. Our family engagement person has had every week, we have something for the parents on Zoom, and we always kind of embed that mental health in there too, because it's important. What's going on, like you said it yourself, Kimberly, this has not happened in any of our lifetimes before, not mine, not the people that we are serving. And to make sure that that's happening is so important, and we want to just keep doing that, and that's just become more so than the academics. Reading and writing, they'll get that. But this mental health piece is key. And a lot of people try to sweep it under the rug, but we have really been going forth when doing that. And I just implore that everybody do the same.
And if I can just piggyback on that, because I think there's two really important elements. One is that we've always known it's important, right? The well-being of a caregiver, whether that's maternal depression, whether those are the adverse childhood experiences, whether it's toxic stress. These were all things that we all knew. I think yes. the added element to this is the communal trauma. So we know we have a lot of experience. Let me just tell you 2 words, Katrina. Right. I mean, this was a natural disaster for a lot of communities. Mm-hmm. This did not impact all of us equally, right? Or equitably. And I think it's important for us to lift that up, that there is there is science, there is research that we have about what it means for a community to go through a traumatic event as a community. People that experience tornadoes, right? The person across the street from you lost their house and you didn't. What does that mean, right? But everything else got devastated, right? And so I say that because it's important for our teachers and our educator partners to understand that we actually know something about this, and languishing, that there's a cycle to this, right? That there are actual important strategies that by lifting it up, being awareness, so that you understand what's happening to you as an educator, as a parent interfaced with the children. And so you can observe and see what's happening to children as they might experience euphoria and then behavioral concerns, mm-hmm, right? Mm-hmm. All that is part of the cycle of trauma. That is what I think that a really important takeaway, that this is part of a traumatic experience for a lot of families. That means our families.
Oh,
I know she
like we lost you again. She's on a roll too.
The good part.
I know. Dr. Essie, I didn't want to leave you out. It's such a good question, and we're spending a little bit more time on it, but it's important.
Everybody is saying almost what I was thinking about, but what I was going to say is that I'm so happy that we're even acknowledging it, because for a long time we did not acknowledge it, and BIPOC, community, children of color got punished for that because of what is in the environment. Before, it was the lead, it was the water, it was just the poverty that our children were going. I was telling one of our funders the other day, I said, all our children are depressed. I'm not a clinician, but I could see it in their eyes. Our parents are too. So now that we're beginning to acknowledge that, the one thing I will leave with the participant is environment is a third teacher. How can you make the environment so that it can do a little bit more for children, relax them, go easy on them and all that? And maybe we need to rethink just dragging every child to timeout because they're acting out. Because like Gloria was saying, even if I didn't lose my own house and I saw that my friends are losing their own house, or Jimmy's grandpa or Bo's grandpa died, but mine, the children can feel that too. So thank God that we are beginning to acknowledge that. In Grand Rapids, Michigan, we have a program called Keep Early Childhood Education Positive, because we have identified that our early childhood education children, they need special attention. It can be mental health that we use for a teenager that we're going to water down for these children. So we have to make sure that we have infant mental health, and we also have clinicians who specialize in working with children. But also, because of the whole racial equity thing, know that minority children are going to be experiencing this even more. So we have to do targeted work and pay attention to them. And to me, that's why equity comes in. A community who have really high concentration of poverty and all these issues deserve a high concentration of resources and intervention to kind of help pull them out of it. Thank you for the opportunity.
You're on mute, Kimberly.
I'm sorry. Okay, I feel like we could do a whole panel discussion just on this topic, because it is so important and it affects all of us, so thank you so much for all of your comments. I'll get to the next question. We just have a few more here and we're running out of time. Are the translated materials available in Urdu for families? I have families that do not want the shot and I have no information for them in Urdu. I'm assuming that might be for Ms. Edwards. Please answer quickly.
Certainly. So that one's fairly easy. We have lots of folks who speak all different dialects from the Mediterranean sector of the world. So what I would suggest is going to our website, www.accesscommunity.org, because there's lots of different phone numbers and offices and things, and you can find the place you're looking for. Give them a call. They will probably know somebody who speaks Urdu or can get you in contact with somebody who does.
I want to say something also, because this is so regional. In Grand Rapids, we have Refugee Education Center that also work with a whole lot of people from the refugee community. You have the African refugee people from Bosnia, from all over Syria coming. So I think for every community there is that. Most people on the panel just answered the question that was posed to them. So we know that there is all these organizations or agencies that are working with all types of families. So if you're struggling, just either reach out to your United Way or 211, or reach out to HighScope to connect with us, and we'll get you that, because all the communities, they are included in all those communities that are very vulnerable, that are struggling. If you're a refugee and you're here and your world is falling apart, before you left your host country, you're here now and things are falling apart, you can imagine the trauma that they're going through.
Yeah, absolutely. So important.
So important to be vocal about this. Don't put it under the rug anymore. Yeah. This is really, we've got to talk about it.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. It's okay to say that I'm not okay. Seek help.
Absolutely.
And we don't want children of color and families of color to be punished because they are exhibiting what is normal under the emotional stress that they have been under. We've got to educate our staff, not be biased against that manifestation of their behavior. And we've got to make sure we get some help to support staff and external help with partners, because this is going to be front and center. It always was there, but now it's going to be front and center.
This has been an amazing discussion. I feel like we're just getting to the meat of it, and I want to keep talking, but they're telling me I have to move along because we have a hard stop time. I'm so sorry, but I'd like to thank. We do need a part two. I'd like to thank just all of our panelists and our participants for this discussion. And right now, I'm just going to close things out and let Kim button it up for us and say goodbye. Thank you for having me too. I really enjoyed this. And as a mother of a 2-year-old, everybody has enlightened me to something. And as I said, you just get so bogged down with work and household chores and everything. Sometimes you just have to step back and observe and look at yourself and see, you know, I need to have sometimes just a mental health day for myself, just to do nothing. You know, my husband thinks, oh, when you go out by yourself, that's enough. It's not enough. But I could keep going on, and I'll button it up now and pass it on to Kim. Again, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much to all of the panelists and to Kimberly Gill for a great discussion. There was a lot of valuable information that we shared, and we hope everybody enjoyed it. I'd like to thank WDIV for being the media sponsor of the 2021 HighScope Conference. We are taking a short break for lunch before you head to your final breakout session. We hope you have enjoyed HighScope's virtual conference. We missed hosting you in person, but we plan to be back in Detroit next year. I hope many of you will join us. Don't forget to take our survey and share your feedback with us. We look forward to reading your comments next year. And thank you to Key Bank and Oakland University for sponsoring our featured session today. Thank you again for joining us.